All right, welcome to our fourth session of Mugs and Hugs. I'm here today with Justine Saffir.
Hi.
And I'm Jennifer
Got my mug.
Ozgur.
Oh,
we got it?
good. Yeah, we got our mugs too. I change my mug all the time, Justine, and I asked my daughter if I could borrow hers because this just felt a little more preschoolish to me.
This one is actually made with the first representational picture that my granddaughter ever made. It's plum blossoms.
Oh,
that's beautiful.
What
How
a
special.
great memory, yeah. So for those of you who don't know Justine, she is a preschool teacher. She is a child advocate. Mostly, she advocates for children in many ways, but primarily focused on preschool and appropriate education for that age level. She's a parent educator. She teaches parents how to use positive techniques with their children and how to help children just thrive in their environment and how to teach them to, I guess just be who they are and
I'm
still
kind of evangelical. I believe in doing brain appropriate discipline, communication, and education. And I pretty much will spread the word to any group of people who works with other human beings who will listen to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Justine. So if somebody was going to look you up on the internet, what might they find?
Not a whole lot. I'm not real famous, but they would find references just to my school and our philosophy. They would probably find references to doing a bunch of talks on obscure topics of parenting and education, from developmentally appropriate education to positive discipline with teenagers, to you name it. A lot of obscure topics that would make them wonder exactly who this person is, but clearly connected to children and families. And then, traffic tickets, donations to the Redwood Society, I don't know.
And I was saying earlier before we started the session that you may not be famous online, but you definitely are famous in your local community, and you have supported so many families, parents, and children, and people really respect you and appreciate what you give.
And that's kind of what I'm about is, the starfish story.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So I'm totally paraphrasing the story. It's The Star Thrower by Lauren Eisley. But the idea is that somebody finds, after a bunch of starfish, millions of starfish have washed up on the beach, somebody finds a man who's taking the starfish and throwing them back out to sea, and surveys the beach and says, you realize there are millions of starfish here. You're not going to make a difference. And the guy picks up a starfish, tosses it back, and says, made a difference to that one. And that's kind of what drives me is I'm lucky enough to get to do what I love in a way that can make a difference to a family here, a kid there. And that's what keeps me going.
Well, and what I feel that is, if every community has a Justine, then collectively we are making that impact that is so desperately needed, I think.
Yeah, and you need to have one in every area. I just do the parenting and education stuff. So you need to have somebody who's passionate about all the things we need to be passionate about in every community. And then we help each other do better at everything.
Well, so are we ready to start with our famous Fast Five?
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to take that away, Jen.
All right, because I hear already some of the themes emerging, so I'm getting excited. Would you like me to start, or would you like to start? Me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So our first question we have is, what has been one of your proudest moments in the work that you do? And beyond that, what do you think contributed to that success?
That's two questions. You are cheating. Let's see. I can't really think of a proudest moment. It's a series of snapshots. it's things like, getting a note from a parent that says, thank you for keeping me from missing the boat with my child this year. It's having a parent email me years after being in our preschool saying, so there's a kid in my kid's 7th grade class who is struggling and I don't feel like they're supporting him well. What can I do? It's watching the ripples go out. It's having a parent come back to us and say, nobody knew my kid like you know my kid. It's the message of knowing that you made a difference, that you made somebody's life easier. There's a herd of dogs running through the room. Ignore them.
So I don't know if I'm projecting too much, but to me, it sounds like a lot of, it resonates with me that I hear you saying that it's the validation, the recognition that what you're doing is making that impact. So then what do you think, is there a certain strategy or theme that you have to kind of follow up with, what contributes to that? Do you think there's a certain thing that you keep doing that people are validating and recognizing that, yes, that is the system that you're using?
I'm a lifelong learner and I really believe in that. And for me, my journey is that I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I came home from kindergarten saying I was going to be a teacher and my parents thought it was cute. It was less cute, by the end of college, but they've dealt with it. And I was a co-op nursery school kid. So I wanted to do parent education and teaching. So I wasn't yet teaching in a co-op. I was working in a childcare center, and there was a program in our area, a parent ed program. And so I thought, well, great, I will go and be a volunteer facilitator of these parenting classes. And they said, great, we want you to go through our program and take the class first. And I thought, cool. But being trained as a preschool teacher already, I didn't expect anything new from the class, but get the hang of it. And what I quickly discovered was that in a parenting program, there were a whole lot of things that they should have taught me in teacher training, and they didn't. And I began sponging it up wherever I could get it. And I did end up in the parent co-op a couple of years after that. And there I learned more things about education I should have been taught in teacher training. And from there, I went on to study and learn more. And it's a journey of having, every now and then there are things that and every now and then you hear someone articulate it and you're like, yeah, that's it. And so you collect those. And then you pass them along when people need them. And it's that difference. It's realizing that everybody is really okay. And I think one of the biggest things that parents miss in this world with their children is the message that their children are being exactly the people they're supposed to be. That human beings are a social group. We are meant to live in societies. And within that society, we are meant to have people who are good at everything. Every village needed the storyteller and the repair person and the naturalist and the religious and spiritual leader and the mathematician. If you don't have all of those things, you will fail as a village because something that needs to happen for human life won't happen. And then we get into these situations where people are raising their children who nature designed to have all kinds of different brains so they could do all kinds of different things. And everybody says, yours is different. This is a problem. Yours is not fitting the mold. And the idea is they're not supposed to fit a mold. They're supposed to be different. And what parents don't get empowered with is the idea that the game is figuring out who yours is and then teaching it to be the best one of those it can be. There's a great Abraham Lincoln quote that we have up on the wall at school that says, whatever you are, be a good one. And parents don't get that message. And so parents come in feeling embarrassed for their kids. Kids come in feeling like failures already. We had, one little guy that I remember who's now gasp, I think a teenager, but he had pretty much been kicked out of several other preschools. And people told his mom to come to us. And so the first day that he was soloing at nursery school, he hit another kid, and the other kid started crying, and this little guy ran into the other room. And so after comforting the child who'd been hurt, I went to find him, and I found him sitting on the sofa in the reading area with his head between the cushions. So I pulled him out and I talked to him, and I said, you know, it feels bad when you make a mistake, huh? You made a mistake. You did not plan to hit that kid. And it happened. Everybody makes mistakes. That's okay. Kids are here to learn. And my job is to help you learn how to not hit people, because everybody makes mistakes. The game is that we have to learn how to do it a different way. And so he went home with his mom, and he didn't say a lot. On the ride to school for his next day of nursery school, as they entered the parking lot, he said to his mom, "Mommy, does everybody really make mistakes?" And his mom came into school teary-eyed, realizing, and I'm teary-eyed remembering it, this was the first time this kid had gotten the message that he wasn't doing anything terrible, that he was just a little kid with impulse control. And by the end of the year, he knew how to play with other kids. And I won't say that it always went smoothly, on account of, you know, partly he's human. And, you know, and partly he was still learning, because everybody is. But he had realized that he was a person of value, not a flawed person, and that he could learn how to work with others in a way that it would work well. You know, one of the neatest things you can teach kids is that everybody's different, and that some things are easy for some people and hard for other people. So it's hard for some people to sit still and be in a discussion. It's easy for other people. And we don't properly teach kids that. And I think one of the things that makes the biggest difference is starting out by teaching every adult that is a truth about themselves and about children. And that's why different kids need different kinds of parenting, different kids need different kinds of education, because they need what works for them. And I think, you know, giving people that message frees them to figure out what's going to work well for them and their families and their children. And I think, you know, it's all out there, but most of us haven't encountered the information, so we don't have it. And I think that's what makes the difference, is truly believing that every other human being is doing the best they can with what they've got to work with, and that we can give them the gift of having more to work with, and that it's fun. You know, the challenging kids are I won't say that the kids who come in being able to work with other people really well are not fun, but the really cool thing is the kids that come in not getting that about themselves and walk out the door getting it. That's fun.
What I love about the way you told that story, I mean, I see that, you know, 2-3-year-old child, and you broke it down so easily, and it's so simple the way you say it, but yet it's so complex that it makes me wonder, you know, why it's not so obvious to everyone because of the way you
I wonder
distilled
that
it.
a lot too.
And it made me realize too, you know, we say, well, they have their strengths and we have our challenges and everyone's different. But the way you said it, it just made me realize that school honors one type of strength and
Yeah.
accommodates for these challenges. And then there's a label attached to it, when really it's just understanding the child and doing what's best for them.
I was
Yes?
told growing up that I was a great person and a good kid, because I tend to be good at mathematical, logical, and linguistic tasks. And I can sit still easily, and I like to listen. And when you can do that, you go to school and they tell you that you're smart and you're good. And I had classmates who apparently were not smart or good. Now, it is my luck that I was born into the society I was. Had I been born in, say, Sparta, they would have sat my parents down very early and said, she's never going to amount to anything. You might as well just put her in an institution, because What I can't do is hit a ball and get to first base, climb over a chain link fence, or walk across the room without tripping on my own feet. Now, fortunately, in my culture, people say, yeah, but she's not good at sports. And that's fine. Had I been born into a culture where that mattered and nobody cared about the mathematical, logical, linguistic stuff, I would have been a special ed kid.
Wow.
Yeah, and Justine, as you were telling your story about that young child who was still learning how to play with others, I could feel the passion in you. I could feel it in Jen, and my eyes were welling up. Like, it just, the energy in the room was just like, wow, this is really deep. And I was thinking, like, this is such a simple story, yet you're hitting something. You're hitting the heart of something really, really deep in our society and human beings. And
I don't think this kid's other teachers before that, the ones who all called him a problem and called his parents and kicked him out and put him in timeout for 2 hours, I don't think that they didn't mean to be unkind. They didn't understand how to look at him and figure out what he needed, and they didn't understand how to teach it to him, and that's not their fault. Nobody taught them that.
Yeah, it's a perspective shift, right?
Yes.
And as I listen to you, I'm also thinking that what you're teaching here to the adults and to this child who now realizes I make mistakes because I'm human, you're teaching people to have self-compassion as well. And when they can accept themselves for being whoever they are, whether they're the kid that hits, or they're the kid that's the storyteller, or they're the kid that's the cobbler, when they have that kind of self-compassion, it can go outward more. And one of the things I do in my house with my own family, both the adults and the children in my family, is I try to have animals in my home. And often it's like, well, the cat should be behaving this way because that's what cats do. And I'm like, not all cats do that.
No one told the cat that. Yeah.
Some cats are lap cats. This one is not. You know, some cats like to play with a ball and a string. Some don't. Like, there's no one way to have a cat. But then there are other things like, well, the cat should know better. The cat should know not to scratch on this piece of furniture anymore. And I'm like, it's a cat.
Well, and the other piece is, let's talk about this concept of knowing better. So do you know that it's much better not to lose your temper with your children and to always speak calmly to them? Are you aware of that information? Okay, then I would assume, therefore, that you never lose your temper and snap at your kids.
Right.
Because you know better.
But as a human being, that's not possible.
Yeah. There are a couple of pieces. One, you need to know what to do. So you need to know what knowing better is. And the other piece is you need to be in a place at that moment to be able to do it. And if those two conditions are not there, it's not going to happen. And we put this on kids all the time. Well, you should have known. Or when I asked you yesterday what to do if you were frustrated with somebody and you said, use my words, you obviously understand that. So why did you then go to first grade today and shove somebody in line? It's like, it's not, knowing what to do is a very important, crucial piece. And it doesn't mean you can do it in the situation. Things move a lot faster in real life.
And there's emotions involved.
Yeah, and I can tell you what I'm supposed to do if my car goes into a skid. I can explain it in great detail. Want to know what percentage of the time I can do it when my car goes into a skid? Small amount. And it doesn't mean that I don't understand it. There's a difference between understanding and being able to do it when things are coming fast.
Yeah.
And we forget that human brains are human brains and that children have them.
But what I really love about this whole concept of is basically acceptance of what is and who you are. What I love about that is it's transferable. It's transferable in so many situations, right? It's transferable with the pets. It's transferable with my neighbor. It's transferable for me. It's transferable with the earth, right? Like, we got all this stuff going on in the world right now, right? We have all this climate change, and we have this pandemic, and people can say what, oh, it's because of this, or it's because of that, or it's their fault, or this person's fault. And the reality of it is, this is just the planet doing its thing.
Yeah.
Planet needs to get back in balance, so it's going to do that.
And in order to respond well, each of us needs to have been taught what to do to respond well. And then we need to be in a place to be able to do it. And sometimes that takes a lot of practice. And it definitely takes somebody teaching us what is the appropriate thing to do. And we often don't do that with kids. We tell a kid with an ADD diagnosis, you need to be calmer and you need to pay attention longer. Well, that's lovely. And nobody wants the day to go better than that kid. Nobody is working harder than that kid. And if you don't teach them the skills that will enable their brain to do that, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So now that we're in this pandemic, and you have this beautiful philosophy that you teach people, what are your passions about working through this pandemic with families and children?
People are spending a lot more time at home together, which is both very exciting, and I'm getting a lot of emailed questions about, okay, how do we handle the conflict? So this is a great time for all of us to practice our conflict handling. The piece that's really been on my mind lately for kids, pandemic-wise, has been this virtual learning concept. And that's been I think my biggest passionate concern lately. People are home, and there are still ways that we can reach them. We can Zoom, we can, from our school, we are not doing distance learning for reasons that I would be happy to rant about if you ask me. But we are trying to do support. And so we have a suggestion of activities for the week, because parents have said it would help us to have more suggestions on how to fill our time productively with kids. And one piece of that is a section on talking with kids. And so we've included things like, how do you help kids resolve conflict? How do you help kids feel comfortable about when is this going to end? How do you talk to kids about trying things that feel risky? How do you do this unschooling, talking to kids about education thing? And so just, that piece of being in contact each week with people asking questions, and then all of us discussing and sharing the answers in whatever format we have, so that we know we can keep supporting each other. I think that piece is working much better. This distance learning piece is not working well for virtually everyone.
Well, you were saying before before we started recording, just catching up and introducing each other personally, you were saying that from your perspective, preschool behind the screen for you is not something that is best practice. And so I was wondering your perspective more on that, if you could elaborate.
So, our school decided that we would not hold classes. It didn't feel safe and responsible. We also decided that we were not going to offer any virtual alternative. Kids were designed by nature to learn in two ways. They were designed to follow the grown-ups around and to play with each other. They were designed to learn by modeling after their grown-ups and by play. Those are the two ways that nature planned for children to learn. And that allows them to learn the specific things they need in their environment and culture. So those things involve play and action. They don't involve sitting in front of a screen. And in fact, sitting in front of a screen is causing kids to develop in a way that is good for sitting behind a screen, but not doing actual life very well. So we want to minimize the amount of time they're spending at screens And people are asking first and second graders to sit still behind a screen for 5 hours a day. And that is not only not best practice, that is beyond worst practice. And the other piece is that the way that children, and when I say young children, definitionally that means ages 0 to 8. There's a big brain change that happens somewhere around 7. And basically, the big brain change that happens around 7 is that the corpus callosum, which is the band of neurons that let your left and right hemispheres communicate better, comes into its own and gets useful around age 7. And around age 7 means 5 for some kids, 9 for others, right? So until you have that, there are a bunch of things your brain is not really prepped to do. And so 0 to 8, what kids need, they learn best when they are interested in the topic. And it's hard to get them interested in the topic over a screen. You can do invitations to get them interested in real life much more easily. It can be done over a screen, and some skill teachers can do it, but it's not ideal. They need it to be interactive. There's clearly a limit to how interactive they can be over a screen. They need it to be hands-on. When you use your hands on something, nerve growth hormone fires off in your nervous system. Nerve growth hormone, surprisingly from the name, creates more growth in your nerves, right? And growth in your nerves is what learning is. Learning is defined as a change in the brain. And what that means is kids are born with a whole lot of neurons, a whole lot of brain cells. They don't communicate well. Every time you have an experience, your brain gets fuzzy and slimy, okay? Fuzzy in that little axons and dendrites grow out from the neuron so that it can communicate with others. And slimy, those lines get myelinated, coated with myelin, which is a slippery fatty substance that allows electrical impulses to move faster, right? So every time you have an experience, your brain gets fuzzier and slimier, and we are aiming for fuzzy, slimy brains, folks. That is our goal in education, okay? And you don't get fuzzy, slimy brains as well when you aren't touching the things you're learning. Kids need to feel emotionally safe, and it's real hard for them to do that on a screen when people can't read them and touch them. Kids need to be in interaction for optimal learning, interaction with other kids, and for little kids, that does not mean talking on a screen. So most of the things that involve appropriate practice for learning for kids 0 to 8 don't happen on screens. Now, we only get a little better at that stuff between 8 and 14 or so. There's another huge brain change thing that happens 10 to 12-ish, and you get a whole bunch more growth, and you get what's called pruning, which is when neural connections that haven't been used go away because your brain assumes you're in a culture where you don't need them. This is why if you know somebody who learned a foreign language, if they learned it before age 10 or so, they can probably speak without an accent. And if they learned after age 10 or so, they probably have an accent. Because one of the things we are born with is the ability to hear and process and make every sound known to humans. And in this pruning event, the ones we haven't used go away. And we get accents in other languages. So there are a whole bunch of brain changes then. And so probably for high school, this screen thing works for a percentage of kids, remembering that our brains all work differently. Those of us who learn in motion and in action are not going to get that on the screen. Those of us who can learn auditory visually are going to get it and will be great. But those who need to learn through movement or through interaction with others, it's not going to work very well for us. So it's not going to work very well at all, particularly not in the doses we're giving for younger kids, and it's going to do some damage. It's going to work for a small percentage of kids, and for others, it's not, and they're going to be lost and frustrated. Their parents are therefore going to be lost and frustrated. Many of the teachers are going to be lost and frustrated. And I think any of us who knows anyone who's either a student, a parent, or a teacher right now knows that. There are people who are in their niche and it's working great. And if it is, embrace it. But if it isn't, get your kid out of it and let them play and follow you around. You know, this is not a permanent thing. We're talking a year or two here, folks. Did you know that it takes a kid at least 2 good years of school to recover from 1 bad year at school? It's not worth it. And they gain so much by playing, modeling after their grown-ups, and following you around. So if you have a kid at the very least up to 3rd grade and it's not working, get them out. Stay home, play, have a good time. I really feel strongly about this, and stress around learning is exactly what you don't want. When you are stressed, there's a hormone called cortisol that fires off, and a little of that gets you alert, but a lot of that, a lot of the time, it shuts down your cognition. Nature assumed that if you're stressed, you're probably in a dangerous situation, like there's a bear about to attack you. And when there's a bear about to attack you, it is not the best time for cognition. Okay, bear attacking you, you don't want to stop and think, wow, is this a black bear or a brown bear? I remember you were supposed to do things differently. And I remember you could tell by the color of the fur, but not in the sun. Is this bear in the sun? Oh, wait, and there was a thing about the teeth. I can't see its teeth. This is not a good time to do this thinking. So what your brain does is it shuts down most of the blood and electrical stuff going on in your thinking part of your brain. And it directs more to the fight, flight, or hide part of your brain. So this is really good when you might be eaten by a bear. It is not good when you're learning differential equations. When you're learning differential equations, you really want the cognitive parts of your brain to be working. So if you are a kid and you are sitting in calculus class and you are stressed, you really would be doing better to get out of calculus class and go somewhere else and enjoy yourself and go back to it than you would to sit there being stressed. Because what's happening is you are not learning it for 45 minutes. And there's a way better use for that 45 minutes. I'm a little passionate about this stuff.
Which is why we ask you the questions.
Well, and the whole neuroscience and how the brain works, absolutely love it. And that is our tribe. We love how the brain works, metacognition. And again, like you break it down so well. It's like I'm hearing it again for the first time. And so that brings me to question number 3, which is, you had already spoken so eloquently, because our brains learn in stories. You telling the stories of when you got into this and you realized that you wanted to be a teacher, and you clearly have a knack for being able to educate us on such complex topics. And what I'm curious about is, you said that you were 5, you came home and you told your parents, I know what I want to be. I want to be a teacher. And you've lived that. And I'm wondering, do you remember what it was when you were 5 that realization happened?
School was cool. I went to a co-op nursery school, and I remember my first teacher. And in fact, she's at a local school. She is referred to as Grandma Virginia, and she's in her 90s, and she still pops in to read stories every now and then to the kids at that school. And when she was not in her 90s, quite some time ago, a long time ago, she was my nursery school teacher, and she was goodness and light. She made me feel known and loved, and I liked the way that felt. And she made learning exciting, and my parents made learning exciting. And I went to kindergarten, and learning was still exciting. Part of the reason learning was so exciting when I was in kindergarten is because I went to kindergarten in 1966. And in 1966, kindergarten was still a children's garden. We did weaving, and we did coloring, and we did art projects, and we heard stories. no one asked us to do things that our brains were not ready to do yet. And it was fun and it was exciting, and we had caterpillars in the classroom, and I loved it. And it was a place that felt good to be. And part of the reason it felt good to be, I now realize, is that my brain was tuned toward it. It was not as good a place to be for some of the kids that I went to school with. And so one of the things that I want as a teacher is, I want my classroom to be a good place to be for every kid. Not just the kids who sit at circle time and answer the questions appropriately. I want all the kids to be fired up about learning and being in school, because that's something that I can send them off with as an early teacher. And, you know, when I was working in my kids' classrooms as volunteers all the way up, I wanted it to be an exciting place for them. And I wanted them to have a great time every morning I was in the classroom with them. And so for me, it was that it was a good place to be. You got to learn things, you got to answer questions. And as I put, even when I was 5, I loved working with small children. There are now much wider range of children that fit into the definition of smaller than me than when I was 5, but it's still true. And I just kind of always, that was what I wanted to do. And a lot of teachers, especially the passionate ones, will tell you that when they were little, they lined their teddy bears up and taught them things, or they made the neighborhood children play school with them. So when my grandchildren make me play school with them and I get to be one of the students and they get to be the teachers, I am very excited. I think it is leading good places.
That's awesome, Justine. I came from a family of teachers too, and I knew pretty early on. I always said I wouldn't do what my parents did because they taught, you know, high school and middle school, and I wanted to teach the younger kids. I wanted to teach preschool. And then I ended up teaching elementary, and I was fortunate to be in kindergarten for 3 years also. But I still said I didn't do what my parents did.
Yeah, I thought I didn't like school-age children until I actually got to know them. And then the first day, my daughter was in a 6, 7, 8 combination class in middle school. And I went in for my first aiding day. My daughter leaned over and she said, "So Mom, don't worry. They're just regular kids with makeup." And I got to love working in middle school. And I love the high schoolers. And high schoolers love other people's moms. They don't like their own moms. Middle schoolers don't like their own moms, but they love other people's moms. And so it's really important that we don't stay out of school at that point. Your kid will hate you being there, but their friends really need you.
That's making a whole lot of sense with my freshmen. Thanks, Justine.
Yeah, so let them know you're working you're working in the classroom for the other kids. Yeah. And they can enjoy someone else's parents.
Absolutely. So you had told us earlier when we first started that you would talk to anyone who listens. And yeah, and we're listening, right? And those of us who are tuned in to the Mugs and Hugs, they're listening too. But I'm curious, if there was one person who could be influential when it comes to children, families, education, and you could tell them anything you wanted, but you had a short amount of time because you're on an elevator and you're going up to the top floor, who would that person be and what would you want to say?
Normally, I'm going to verge into political realm. Normally, I would say the President of the United States, but I won't say that at this moment. I would probably say a governor. Here's the reason. A lot of what's happening in schools today that's not good for kids is happening because people who are not educators and have not studied how brains work and how children work are making decisions about how education is supposed to work, and they're tying teachers' hands to have to follow them. And so I would like to talk to somebody who is making decisions about education, but doesn't have the knowledge to be making those decisions appropriately for kids. And in just a few minutes, I could get them sparked and curious. And there would be at least one advocate in the chain of decision making who would know what questions to ask.
Love it.
I know you and I have had a lot of conversations around that, because
Largely about frustration when it's not going well.
Well, and we've shared experiences of being in systems where non-educators are basically in charge of making all the decisions, and it's just not working.
And they're making very logical decisions from where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know why those aren't good decisions. And unfortunately, the kids have to live with them and the teachers have to live with them.
And so do the parents.
And the parents have to live with them.
And there's that theme again, Heidi, the word curious came up, that to be curious and that they would know not what the right answers are, but the right questions to ask. And that's a big thing with what Heidi and I are doing as far as appreciative inquiry, where if you ask the question, the question that you ask will totally determine the outcome and the trajectory. And so to have that perspective of curiosity and wonder, and as I'm even saying it now, like you said, children, like their job is to play. And I feel like as adults, we kind of lost that. And we're like there to solve the problem and get the right answer and just move on. Whereas, well, wait a minute, what if we just played
We
to
learn
find
best in
out?
play too. Talk to people who are great chefs. How did they do most of the learning? Not by studying recipes. They started there to give them a place to go play, but then they went and played. And that was how they learned many of the things that have made the biggest difference for them. Physicists go in the lab and basically think and play.
Mm-hmm. So then what would play look like with the governor, and they are making decisions about educational practices and testing and all of reform? And so what does play look like when it's all decisions and it's headspace?
Do you mean what would it look like for them to play and learn?
If you could wave a magic wand and have them make the decisions that you think would truly best serve children, what would that look like?
First off, you wouldn't have to sit in your desk all day because children learn better in motion, some of them in particular. So your job is to find the way that you are most comfortable and most tuned in to what we're working on. Because one, we want them to be in the position where they're best learning. And two, we want them to be in the habit of asking themselves what works best for them. A lot of their time is spent in play because we know that the more relaxed they are and the calmer they are, the better they'll do. Amusingly, the more we cut recess to get to the important stuff, the more trouble kids have with the important stuff and the more discipline problems they have. Every grown-up would know how to talk to kids in a problem-solving manner, so that we wouldn't have discipline problems in the school. When you have discipline problems in the school, what it means is that your discipline is a problem. Because otherwise what you have is problem solving and communication that's respectful. Kids will be respectful to grown-ups when grown-ups are respectful to kids. And they won't do it 100% of the time either, on account of one, they're human, and two, they're young. But globally they will do it and we won't have a lot of the problems we're having. And those problems get in the way of the academic learning because you can't do cognitive learning, of which academic learning is one small subset. If you look up the different definition of academic learning, it pretty much says not relevant, but the cognitive subsets that we think of that way. To do cognitive learning, you need to be in a place for maximum cognition for your brain to work the best. And so the first and biggest piece of that is not curriculum or lesson presentation, it's atmosphere. So the first piece is we need to have relaxed, playful atmosphere, because that is what turns kids' brains on to be able to do the cognition we need. We need to be settled towards kids doing the learning in the way that works best for them. And that is very different. And it doesn't mean getting interested in something and then exactly 25 minutes later stopping being interested and moving on to something else. So we need free-flowing schedules and interconnected, realistic curriculum planning. We need to understand that curriculum, what people learn is everything they do in the day, because everything you experience, you learn from. So we need an environment that's relaxing and playful. Within that, we need to provide all of the tools and things that will allow children to do what they naturally do, which is model after adults and play and learn the things they want to learn. So for instance, one of the things on my list of things to do this afternoon is I'm going to paint lima beans. Now I'm looking forward to that because I haven't done anything artistic and playful, but also my granddaughter is at an age where she's starting to be interested in, which means her brain is getting ready for the cognition of basic math facts. And if I paint one side of lima beans, and then I have a jar of lima beans on the table, and we have them out, we can playfully start noticing that 3 purple and 1 white come out the same as 1 purple and 3 whites. That's learning math facts. And by providing playful things in the environment that we can play with and happen upon this information, that's how she will learn it in the way her brain's designed to learn. We had a great discussion the other day. We were making cupcakes, and I was teasing them because I said, okay, so how many cupcake cups do we need to put in here? And we discovered that there were 4 3s. And I said, no, there are 3 4s, and turned the cupcake pan around. That was my invitation to her. By being argumentative in a silly way, it was interesting, and that's the invitation. She is now interested, and it is relevant to her because she's making cupcakes. It was also relevant that it was divisible by 2 because she and her sister were making cupcakes. So we're not going to sit down and practice math facts and do flashcards, or have me say, today we're going to think about 12. What happened was, through playful experience, the cognitive pieces are going in. And it's my job as an adult to put places to re-encounter those in our environment, so that through play and through modeling after the adults, it'll happen naturally. So in our classrooms, one is we need to get an atmosphere where everybody is relaxed, everybody feels respected and emotionally safe, because that's when cognition happens. And then we need to put a bunch of things in that environment that make it interesting and relevant for kids to build upon prior learning and to learn about the things we want them to learn. That means we need to put interesting invitations in math, in science, in music. We need to share our passions with them, because that is an invitation that's inviting. That's how we need to do it. We also need to dump the idea of having curriculum in our schools. When school districts decide on their curriculum, what they do is they go out and they buy a thing for a few $1,000s. And the thing has materials and tells teachers, on this day, say this. Here's what happens when you put your focus on that. For some kids, that sequence and timing is probably perfect. And for a whole lot of others, not so much. So 1, it's pretty much wasted on the others. 2, I don't want teachers who can present curriculum, and I don't want a school district that buys curriculum. I want teachers who know how children learn. I don't want a reading curriculum. I want a bunch of grown-ups who know how brains learn to read. I want those grown-ups out there playing and interacting with kids. That's how they learn to read. So I want us to quit teaching curriculum and start teaching how brains work. And when we do that, we'll have kids who are in places learning things in a way that sticks. We're going to ditch homework, because the research shows homework accomplishes nothing in terms of learning up until at least middle school. There are lovely things to do at home, like read with your children. By the way, that doesn't mean read with your children for exactly 20 minutes and make them read for 20 minutes. Because as soon as they're doing it because they have to do it for 20 minutes, here's another little problem with our brains. Our brains are designed to do things for a reason, and they will look for the reason. So if you tell a child they're reading for 20 minutes because they're supposed to read for 20 minutes, or to get a pizza, or those other things, their brain will believe that's why they're doing it. So in the absence of somebody requiring them to do it for 20 minutes, their brain won't see a reason to. And their brain won't see a reason to keep reading past 20 minutes if they're not interested. You don't want to motivate kids with external rewards or external requirements. When you do that, their brains come to believe that that was the primary reason for doing it. Now, you'll be lucky, and if they're also excited enough about the reading material, that might overcome it. But if they're not, it's not gonna. So we need to ditch the rewards. Some of those rewards we call grades. We need to ditch those. What kids need to know and parents need to know is how is your learning going? What have you got figured out? What are the next steps? What's your style in doing it? They don't need to know that you got 85% of it correct. That tells us nothing. Let's look at spelling tests. Okay, I would bet you that everybody who is listening to us now probably is either a good speller or a poor speller. So if you were a good speller, it's possible you started out a poor speller and then you had spelling tests in 3rd and 4th and 5th grade, and that changed it, and then you got to be a good speller on account of the spelling test. No, not so much. And if you're a poor speller, exactly what happened? Because if you were a poor speller and yet you did a spelling test a week in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, what the heck happened that you're still a poor speller? Okay, so it's pretty obvious without a lot of science that spelling tests don't teach people to be better spellers, right? And yet, we still give spelling tests every week. This makes no sense. So we need to start using a little sense about it. And we need to start asking, how does this help children? And if we don't have an answer, we need to look. And does it help children? And if it helps children, we need to make it available and we need to do it. And if it doesn't help children, we need to quit stressing people out about it, because it's wasting time when they could be outside playing, which really will help their cognition.
So Justine, I love your passion, and that I want to jump in and say 1,000 different things, but I'm not gonna because you said it beautifully. I'm wondering, aside from a governor or some other politician, how can we bring this conversation of changing the classroom environment and bringing in how kids learn, how their brains work with learning? How can we get that conversation into the schools like tomorrow?
By doing what we're doing, by talking to as many people as possible, and by doing it with research to back up what we're saying. When I started out, way back when, we told people, I'm teaching this way because my heart tells me it's the right way to do it. And that had power. But a few years later, they developed the ability to study brains without first removing them from the person. And this made it much easier to do a lot more brain studies. So now we have the privilege of saying research validates that this is how brains work. And so those of us who know it, and it's simple, it's not complicated stuff. We need to keep saying it, and we need to say it articulately, and we need to put it in front of people as often as possible, because the more things ripple out, the more people they get to. Each of us who gets it needs to be verbal about it and not worry about upsetting people. You need to go into your child's school and you need to share it with teachers. And you need to share it with them in the way you would like someone to share information with you. People close their ears pretty well if you walk in and say, I'd like to tell you what you're doing wrong. But if you walk in and say, I have learned something so cool and exciting. I am dying to share it. Let me tell you what I learned. You will get people excited and they will want to go in their classrooms and play with it. And so I think the answer is we are as passionate as we can be. We talk to as many people as possible. We empower every parent we run into so that they can advocate for their child and for other children. I mean, this is one of the reasons that I love my little niche in the co-op world, because in co-op schools, parents are in the classroom next to the teachers, and there is no better time to learn than on the fly with kids. And we have one of our local developmentally appropriate elementary schools is staffed more than 50% with parents who went through co-op nursery school before either becoming teachers or going back to being teachers in that kind of an environment and doing it in ways that are more appropriate for children. So I think the way we get it into the schools is we say it far and wide to anyone who will listen. And we let the ripples spread. And we may not get it into all the schools, but again, if you can make a difference to that one, make a difference to that one. Some kid is out there struggling. Yesterday, I butted into somebody else's Facebook conversation and told a mom who was freaking over trying to get her 5-year-old to be a better reader, why she didn't need to worry about it and how to do it in a way that would work for him. Made a difference to that one. That's a mom and a kid who are now more relaxed and having more fun with each other. And that's a kid who's going to be more excited about learning it when his brain is ready, which is probably not at 5. So I think that we get passionate and we spread the word. We write as much as we can write and put it in front of people. We talk as much as we can talk and put it in front of people. We share it as much as we can share and put it in front of people. And we let each ripple reach somebody and make a difference to that one.
I hear a book coming out of you, Justine.
Yeah, people have said that. The spare time thing, not so much of that.
Oh, wow. Well, we could just take this, we put this in Google Translate or talk to text, and your transcript could be the book. It's so rich and varied and immediately applicable. And what we like to do is after we have picked your brain, we always like to have where we turnabout as fair play. And so we always ask our guests, what question would you like to ask us? Do you have any question that excites you that you could turn around and ask us?
Well, everything excites me. So you guys have talked to a whole bunch of, brilliant people in different pieces of education in the course of doing this. I want to know from each of you, what is something new that you've learned recently that you're excited about?
It's a tough one.
Wow. I think and it's a process. It's not like I didn't know it and then all of a sudden I knew it. But I guess I'm in the process of discovery of how teams work and how to best serve when there is a shared purpose and a shared vision, and how I might be a part of their efforts to make what they desire become reality. So I'm in that process of learning how to do that and consult with other like-minded professionals and listen to them, help them have clarity on what they want, and then what I'm discovering is ways that I might best support their efforts. And so learning more about leadership and organizational development, and the same thing with how do children learn, and in hearing what you're saying too, you know, I've been involved in groups where you have these big think tanks, and what are they given? Feathers, pipe cleaners, sequins, and we play. So discovering that that wonder is still so important as adults. Heidi?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the people that I've run into with what I'm doing now are in my camp. So I'm hearing a lot of information that I've already known, and it's being reinforced. But one of the themes that's really bubbling up for me right now is the neuroscience. Like, for me, it was the neuroscience, it was the evidence and the proof that really hooked me in. And I was thinking for social emotional learning, which is kind of my wheelhouse, with mindfulness practices and teaching children just life skills and how to interact with each other, how to be reflective for themselves and set boundaries and communicate with others, and then do the same in reverse. What I'm seeing is it's not just that. Like, if I'm going to be working with people in schools, I really need to get down to how the brain works, the development of the brain, and this is how we do it, this is why we do it, and this is why it works. Just as equally as the skill sets of, mindfulness practices and teaching empathy and kindness. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justine. I'm wondering if there's any of our viewers who want to pick your brain even more, or invite you to come talk to a group of parents or teachers. How would they find you?
They could look up my school. It's, well, there's a long story to the name.
Well, and I see your name is right there on your screen.
It is on my thingy. It's Sunnymont Westside, SUNNYMONT -WESTSIDE. Our website is www.sunnymontwestside, SUNNYMONT, no hyphen, WESTSIDE.org. And there's a link to the director through there. You can email me at director@sunnymontwestside.org, SUNNYMONT, no hyphen, WESTSIDE, or at Justine Saffir, JUSTINESAFFIR @gmail.
We will be sure to put your contact information in the description of this video, because we will be posting this on our YouTube channel, the Mugs and Hugs channel, and we'll make sure that we have that in there as well.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear from people. I would love to learn from people. I'm happy to share information that I've learned with people. I really think that the more of us who support each other, the more it makes a difference to that one.
Well, you've made a difference in my life as an educator, Justine, and as a parent as well. So thank you for being part of me.
Thank you. So many neuro pathways got created through this conversation.
Fuzzy slimy.
Yes. All right, so we'll have to do our classic, I can't hold my mug, but I'll do it for you. 3, 2, 1, and boop. There we go.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.